I was 42 when I realized I didn't want to touch my husband anymore. Not in anger, not after a fight. Just on a random Tuesday morning, watching him make coffee in the kitchen and feeling absolutely nothing. He turned around, smiled at me the way he smiled for 18 years, and I felt my stomach tighten. Not with desire, with dread. Because I knew he'd want to kiss me. And I knew I'd have to pretend I wanted it too. This is the thing nobody tells you about long-term marriage. The moment you realize love and desire aren't the same thing, that you can feel one without the other, that you can look at someone who's been your partner, your best friend, the father of your children, and feel nothing when he touches you. Nothing except the weight of pretending. I love my husband. I need you to understand that first. I love him deeply, genuinely, the way you love someone who's seen you at your worst and stayed, who held your hand through 2 miscarriages, who sat with you in hospital waiting rooms and made terrible jokes to stop you from crying, who knows how you take your coffee and remembers your mother's birthday and still thinks you beautiful even though you haven't felt beautiful in years. But I don't desire him. I haven't in so long I can't remember what it felt like when I did. And that distinction, that gap between loving and wanting, it's destroying me from the inside out. How did I get here? That's the question I asked myself for months before I could even say it out loud. Before I could admit that something was fundamentally broken. Because it's not like there was one moment. One fight, one betrayal, it was gradual. Like watching a photograph fade in sunlight. You don't notice it happening until one day you look at it and can barely make out the faces anymore. I think it started after our second child was born. Maybe even before that. During the pregnancy, my body stopped feeling like mine. It became a vessel, a feeding station, a thing that served a purpose but wasn't actually me anymore. And he was patient. So patient. Waited the 6 weeks, then 8 weeks, then 12. Never pressured. Never demanded. Just waited. And when we finally did try again, I did it because I thought I should. Because it had been too long. Because I was his wife and this is what wives do. I didn't enjoy it. I went through the motions. Made the sounds I thought I should make. And afterward, lying there in the dark, I felt so alone I wanted to scream. He fell asleep happy, satisfied, content. And I stared at the ceiling wondering if I'd ever feel anything again. The early signs were so easy to ignore. I was tired. New baby, hormones, sleep deprivation. Of course I wasn't in the mood. Of course my body felt foreign and unresponsive. It was normal. Everyone said so. The pediatrician, my mother, the mom groups online. Give it time. It'll come back. Your body needs to recover. Be patient with yourself. So I was patient. Months turned into a year. Then 2 years. Our youngest started sleeping through the night. My body returned to something resembling its old shape. The exhaustion lifted. And still nothing. He'd reach for me in bed and I'd freeze. Make an excuse. Too tired. Headache. Early meeting tomorrow. He'd accept it. He always accepted it. He's a good man. He never made me feel guilty. Which somehow made it worse. Because if he'd been angry, if he'd pressured me, I could have blamed him. I could have made this his fault. But he just kept being kind, patient, understanding. And I kept dying a little bit more inside every time he touched me and I felt my body recoil. I started avoiding situations where intimacy might happen. Going to bed after him. Staying up late on my laptop. Coming to bed in full pajamas, hair tied back, face cream thick enough to discourage kissing. I became an expert at creating barriers, and he noticed. Of course he noticed. But he didn't say anything, not for a long time. We just existed in this unspoken understanding that something was wrong but neither of us wanted to name it. The few times we did have sex during those years, I dissociated. That's the only word for it. I'd be there physically but completely absent mentally. Making grocery lists in my head. Planning the next day's schedule. Thinking about work emails. Anything to not be present in my own body. And he never knew. Or if he did, he never said. We'd finish and I'd go to the bathroom and stare at myself in the mirror and wonder who that woman was. Because she wasn't me. She couldn't be me. I didn't know then what I learned later. I didn't know that desire doesn't just disappear for no reason. That bodies and minds are connected in ways we don't talk about. That trauma lives in tissue. That resentment accumulates in silence. That desire is the first thing to die when you stop feeling safe in your own skin. What I learned much later from a therapist I finally worked up the courage to see was that I'd spent years prioritizing everyone else's needs over my own. My children's, my husband's, my boss's, my aging parents, everyone got the best of me. And what was left for myself? The scraps, the exhaustion, the resentment I couldn't even name because I was too busy being grateful. Grateful for a good husband, a stable marriage, healthy kids, a nice house. How dare I be unhappy when I had everything I was supposed to want? Turns out, gratitude and desire don't coexist well when you've erased yourself in the process of being grateful. The therapist also told me something that shocked me. That nearly 40% of American women in long-term relationships experience what I was experiencing. Low desire, avoidance, the sense that intimacy had become a chore rather than a connection. 40%. Almost half, and nobody talks about it. We suffer in silence, thinking we're broken, abnormal, bad wives. When really we're just exhausted, touched out, disconnected from our own bodies because we've spent years using them as tools rather than honoring them as ourselves. I wasn't broken. I was depleted. There's a difference, but knowing that didn't fix anything. It just gave me language for the problem. I still went home to a man I loved but didn't want. I still felt my body go rigid when he touched me. I still felt the weight of disappointing him every single day. Because he knew. By then he knew. The conversation, when it finally happened, wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no accusations. Just the two of us, sitting on the back porch after the kids were asleep, and him asking, very quietly, if I still loved him. And me saying yes. Immediately. Honestly. And then him asking even more quietly if I still wanted him. And me, after a very long silence, saying no. Not right now. I don't know if I ever will again, but right now, no. He cried. I'd never seen him cry like that. Not at our wedding. Not at the births of our children. Not at his father's funeral. But sitting there on that porch, hearing his wife tell him she didn't desire him, he cried. And I held him. And I cried too. Because I wanted to want him. I wanted it so badly. But wanting to want someone isn't the same as actually wanting them. And we both knew it. He asked me what I needed, what he could do, how he could fix this, and I told him the truth. That it wasn't about him, that he hadn't done anything wrong. But I was willing to try, if he was willing to try with me. Not to fix us, but to understand what was actually broken. We started therapy together, individual sessions for me, couples sessions for us. It was hard, harder than I expected, because it meant talking about things we'd been avoiding for years. The resentment I'd buried about carrying the mental load of our household. The anger I hadn't known I was holding about the way my body had been used. For pregnancy, for childbirth, for nursing, for everyone's needs but my own. And him talking about feeling rejected, unwanted, like a roommate rather than a husband. The loneliness of sharing a bed with someone who flinched when he touched her. The fear that I'd fallen out of love with him and was just too kind to say it. The therapist helped us see something crucial. That desire doesn't exist in a vacuum. It needs certain conditions. Safety, connection, autonomy, a sense of self. And somewhere in the chaos of marriage and children and life, we'd lost all of those things. We'd become a functional unit. A well-oiled machine for running a household and raising kids. But we'd stopped being two separate people who chose each other. And you can't desire someone when you've lost yourself in the process of being with them. So we started doing the work. Not to fix my desire. That was too much pressure. Too much focus on the outcome. But to rebuild the conditions where desire might be able to exist again. I started therapy to reconnect with my own body. To process the trauma I didn't know I was carrying. To learn to say no without guilt. To prioritize myself without shame. To remember what it felt like to inhabit my own skin rather than just use my body as a tool. We renegotiated our marriage. What fairness actually looked like. Who did what? Who carried what? We hired help. We lowered our standards. We stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be honest. I started doing things alone. Things that had nothing to do with being a mother or a wife. I took a pottery class. Started running. Spent weekends away with friends. Reclaimed pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. And slowly, very slowly, something shifted. Not desire, not yet, but the conditions for desire. I started feeling like a person again, not just a role, not just a function, but an actual individual human being with wants and needs and boundaries. And my husband, he started seeing me as that person too, not just his wife, not just the mother of his children, but me, separate, distinct, whole. It's been 2 years since that conversation on the porch. And I wish I could tell you that everything is perfect now. That my desire came roaring back and we're like newlyweds again. Some days I want him, really want him, in a way that surprises both of us. And those moments feel like gifts, precious, rare, worth celebrating. Other days, I don't. And I've learned to be okay with that, to not force it, to not perform, to be honest about where I am and what I need. And he's learned to be okay with it too. To not take it personally. To understand that my desire isn't a measure of his worth or my love. That it's something separate. Something that ebbs and flows based on conditions that have nothing to do with how much I love him. To not measure our marriage against some impossible standard of constant passion. We're learning to build intimacy in other ways. Connection that doesn't require sex. Touch that doesn't have to lead anywhere. Presence that's enough in itself. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, when I feel safe and seen and whole in myself, not because we have to, but because we want to. That's what I learned. That desire can't be forced, but it can be invited. Given space, given time, given the right conditions. And sometimes, if you be very patient and very honest and very willing to do the hard work of becoming yourself again, it shows up. Not the way it was before, but different, deeper, more intentional. If you're feeling what I felt, if you love someone deeply but don't desire them anymore, I want you to hear this. You're not broken. You're not a bad wife. You're not abnormal or dysfunctional or damaged. You're a human being who's been depleted, who's lost touch with yourself. And that's not a moral failing. That's just what happens when you give and give and give and forget to fill your own cup. There is a way forward. It's not easy. It's not quick. It doesn't come with guarantees. But it starts with being honest. With yourself, with your partner. About what you're actually feeling rather than what you think you should feel. And then doing the hard work of reconnecting with yourself. Not for your marriage, not for your husband, but for you. Because you deserve to feel whole. You deserve to inhabit your own body. You deserve to experience desire, not as an obligation, but as a gift. And maybe, if you do that work, if you reclaim yourself, you'll find that desire comes back, different than before. But real, and maybe you won't. And that's okay too. Because the goal isn't to fix your desire. The goal is to become whole again. Whatever that looks like for you. You're not alone in this. Millions of American women are feeling exactly what you're feeling right now, thinking they're the only ones, suffering in silence. But you're not alone, and there is hope. Not for a fairy tale ending, but for something real, something honest, something that honors both your love and your truth.